Awesome. David, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get straight into it. And you are building a business called Musket, and you are working on Bitcoin as the rails for payments as a problem. And we're going to start off with a demo. And we didn't do this offline. Let me be very clear to anyone that's listening. It's like, oh, should we try it first? Like, no, let's click record and we'll try it. So David, let's have a crack at using Musket.
Okay, so our product, just so everyone is aware, we're sort of making sure that we can use Bitcoin as a payment. So this is a payment device, a payment terminal that you will know and love. We've got a partnership here with Verifone, so that's our terminal provider. The Musket stack sits inside or on top of the device as software. And the idea being, for everyone who can see it there, that you have two buttons on the screen, pay with card or pay with Bitcoin. If you press pay with card, you enter the amount. If it's synced to our EPOS and you just press checkout, the amount just pops up automatically. You don't need to input anything. But if you press pay with Bitcoin, then the same thing comes up. We've put a big Bitcoin logo in the background because some people got lazy and just started trying to process card transactions on the Bitcoin rails. But yeah, so let's assume you've just come into to David's coffee shop, ordered a latte with oat milk or whatever it is you like. I'm going to charge you 21 pence for that. So I've just put that in. You have to ignore the big red, not for commercial payment. This is a test device. I'm just going to press confirm on there. It raises the QR code instantly. So now it's over to you as the person interacting or buying products with that. So
what I'm hoping, I've got a big red line.
When that goes, hold on.
Oh, we've got a problem with the Riverside blurring, so I'm not able to scan that QR code, I'm afraid, David, from here.
Here
we go. Loading payment details. Done. Okay. 0.0000312 Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Musket sales demo.
There you go.
Let's go for it. Send.
Okay.
Sent.
There we go. Straight through.
Boom. Oh my gosh, cool.
Success. Your receipt comes out. There you go. 21 pence. Bought and paid. Where are you in the world?
I am in Melbourne, Australia.
Okay, so that's gone from Melbourne to south of London in the blink of an eye with final settlement.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's cool.
You've just bootstrapped the Musket business with your Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Oh my God, I've got like energy running up the back of my neck. Oh, it's just so goddamn cool. Okay, so for someone out there that has never heard of you or I, and it's like, what the fuck did those guys just do? Let's try and make it as simple as possible to try and explain what we just did.
Yeah, so what happened there is you tried to buy a product and service from me. Usually to make that payment using a card rail, you would have to physically be here. There's no way you could have processed that payment with a card otherwise on a physical terminal. The option we would have had is for me to raise a payment link and send you that via perhaps WhatsApp or email or some other method, or arguably I could have generated a payment link and shown you a QR code on the screen. You could have scanned that and then paid with your Visa card. Now, interestingly, because I'm in the UK and you're in Australia, paying with that card, what would have happened is in the background, that would have been an international payment. It would have incurred incredibly high fees, most likely interchange plus exchange rates, probably 3 to 4%, I would have said, depending on the card type used and the bank issuing it. So, and we could have processed that transaction. Bit clunky, but we could have done it. Behind the scenes, what then is happening is all kinds of permissioned requests from your Apple account or your phone app through to all of the scheme providers, so the merchant acquirer, the scheme, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and then the final settlement. And that whole process can take up to 30 days, assuming fees aren't even, payments aren't withheld. So, it's somewhat clunky, tons and tons of permission, not a great experience. What we just did was completely flip that on its head, and you've just sent me final settlement instantly in Bitcoin. So I'm a merchant that has transferred I mean, it's not really transferred if we get deep into the weeds of Bitcoin, but it's theoretically a payment from one side of the world to another that has settled instantaneously. So there's no permissions. It's a direct relationship between you and the merchant. Musket in the middle has provided the QR code and the rails and the ability for the merchant to accept that payment and store the Bitcoin and the Lightning on their channel or in their environment, and that's moved from you to them. There's no chargebacks, and the cost of that would have been less than 1%, versus the 4% likely that that an international card charge would have implemented. So I'm not going to say it's magic, but it's kind of magic.
It is kind of magic, David. I didn't understand what a bearer asset was until I fell very heavily down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, which has been 5+ years of extremely deep research. I've owned some now for over 10 years, amazingly. But as an investor, quote unquote, looking at allocating assets, I've really only seriously looked at Bitcoin since 2020. And I'm like, hang on, so what is a bearer asset? So for someone out there that doesn't know what I'm talking about, explain, if you can, what you think a bearer asset means to you, and how, when you're using a MasterCard and a dollar or a euro or an RMB, the difference between that is an experience in terms of value transfer and what just happened with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, a bearer asset is an asset that you hold. It's something that is definitively yours in terms of you own the legal contract or legal rights to possess said item, and you physically actually have it. You know, you can have bearer assets. The risk with bearer assets, whether it's a bearer bond or anything physical specie, any other sort of physical asset, is that quite often you have to rely upon a third party custodian. So you still introduce risk into that environment. We saw a few years ago, a lot of people held jewelry and other expensive items in bank vaults underneath the streets of London in a place called Hatton Garden, which is synonymous with the diamond industry. And there was a famous bank heist, and millions of pounds worth of assets were stolen. They are theoretically bearer assets, but by putting the trust in a third-party custodian, you're introducing risk into it. So if you don't hold it and you can't provably hold it, is it really a bearer asset? You end up in somewhat of a philosophical conversation. Whereas the difference being with Bitcoin, if you hold the asset, if you're not relying upon an exchange or another third-party custodian, all you have to do is remember your seed phrase, either remember it or write it down and make sure that no one else has access to it. And that then is provably yours. Nobody can take it from you unless force is used. You remove all of the risk of third-party custodians. So I think Bitcoin is incredible in a way that we do have bearer assets. They exist today. But to be able to send those instantaneously across the world without risk, we don't have that. So Bitcoin stands in a category and a class of its own based on financial innovation and technological innovation. It's incredible.
When I first heard as well the idea of store of value across time and store of value across space, it really opened up for me this idea of like, okay, well, gold's done a very good job of store of value across time, but the development of the communication networks of the last 150 years, let's call it, meant that it was much easier to call someone up and say, by the way, let's just agree to swap some gold on this piece of paper, because we could do the transaction so much faster. So gold failed at store of value across space. Yeah. And suddenly gold, it's clear that, to me, Bitcoin's a better version of gold in that sense. Because it's like, okay, well, Bitcoin's going to hold value across time because of its scarcity, but also across space, because you can now do what we just did, which is said 21 pennies worth of Bitcoin across the world as a bearer asset. That's never been possible before. Now, as a customer, I was thinking when you were speaking about how we might have done that transaction, I could maybe have called you and given my credit card number across a phone call, and you could have typed that into your FPOS unit. There's different ways of doing it, but I had a fee for that payment, and that was kind of the cost to me. And hopefully, I'd receive whatever product or service I was buying, shortly. But the under the hood, the merchant takes so much risk. That's not always that obvious, right? But like
Yeah.
people get this whole chargeback problem that happens all the time. So how, yeah, any of that resonate, David? But it's that idea of transferring value across space that's just never been possible like this before, isn't it?
Yeah, completely agree. And forgive me just for my eyes flitting around here. I'm
That's
trying
okay.
to pull up a presentation just to reference because I wanted to get the name of the painting correct. So sorry, the artist. So I'll come on to that in a second. Yeah, so there's two things here. I think the transfer of value is really important. So let's cover that to start with. I guess I sort of do I do a talk every now and then about the intersection between AI, Bitcoin, and energy, and my thesis is that effectively those three things unlock the new equivalent of an industrial revolution,
Cool.
technological, information-based revolution. Because what you're doing there is you're fusing the creation of energy, you're linking that with money in a way that Bitcoin is uniquely placed to do. And then you're using that to power the next iteration of value creation and commerce on the internet, which is one of the things that we're building the infrastructure for. Effectively bot to bot, machine to machine payments that don't require any human interaction. They can just use the Lightning Network that we just demoed. And the first step from this, I would argue, started. So there's a painting by a chap called Robert Dudley in 1866, and it's called "From 2 Weeks to 2 Minutes." And it's a picture of. It looks like they're on a ship somewhere, but sort of 18th century chaps in their nice outfits, all
Yeah.
crowded around a candle and with some cables on the floor. And what the painting is depicting, I think it was Dominic Frisby that alerted to me this the first time. But what the painting is depicting is that moment in time when the first transatlantic cable was laid between the UK or mainland Europe and North America, and it took that messaging transfer time down from 2 weeks to 2 minutes. I mean, that is just such an incredible leap because with that information, you can start to then really accelerate trade and finance and just general information. So now, again, we've had this ability to do it digitally to share information, but we've never had the ability to actually shift the asset globally and interconnect trade. There's always been a final settlement which takes typically 30 days or so. So I think what we're likely to see here with the Lightning Network and with Bitcoin, but also I think there's probably a role for stable coins on Bitcoin and Lightning as well, is this borderless instant transaction. In some cases, humans are involved. In some cases, it's just bot-to-bot transactions. But that's another leap forward in terms of global commerce. So, in the same way that was the first step to take it from 2 weeks to 2 minutes, I think, what we're likely to see is a completely new commercial revolution. And we've already seen demos of this streaming payments. You can pay your supply chain by the minute, even by the second if you want to, if you are so inclined. So I think all kinds of different business models, commercial models, and settlement types will emerge from the Lightning Network when it's fully up to scale, fully robust, and it's fully global. And we're really pushing the boundaries in a way that the Visa, the MasterCard, and the international settlements layers just aren't set up to execute right now.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? We're living through an extraordinary time, and I often come back to this fact it's so true, and you can verify this yourself. Information travels unfairly through markets, in
Yeah.
that we're lucky to have found out this stuff right now. Many people haven't pulled the dots together, and that puts us in a unique position to go, okay, well, what do we need to do to make this a reality? Where do we see opportunities to build businesses or build technology or to improve our lives? I had a couple of episodes ago Jesse from Amboss. Have you met Jesse before during your
No,
journey so far?
no, I love
Well,
what they're doing. Yeah.
yeah, and it's very applicable to this conversation. Fascinating listening to him talk about how the Lightning Network is going to scale and how building the plumbing for that as capitalists with lightning channels and adding capital to it, and it's awesome. And he was talking a lot about stablecoins, so I'm completely with you there as
Yeah.
an opportunity. Um, David, where I'd like to take this now is the store of value function of money is just one feature of money. It's also unit of account. It's also medium of exchange. And I think where Musket is sitting is very much this idea of medium of exchange. I'd love to understand, how did you even come across this problem? Like, what were you doing in your life where you're like, this is what I want to do with my time?
Yeah, so it's a good question. That's part of my sort of origin story. I first stumbled into Bitcoin 2014, and apologies if people have heard this before. I was I was in management consultancy before, so I'd spent a period of time in low latency trading and algorithmic trading technologies for BT, City of London, for the first couple of years of my career. Spent about 10 years in management consulting. After that, and then moved to Sky, the TV company, launching streaming businesses all over Europe, so Northern Ireland, Austria, Germany, that was an interesting corporate career. But it was in 2014 when I was at PwC. I was working for Boris Johnson when he was the mayor of London. There was a project basically just to remove 100 million of spend out of the UK government, just be more efficient with spend across common goods and services. It was a classic cost reduction project. I was given a side quest, which was, could we also look at enormous civil engineering contracts and try and investigate whether there's any supply chain fraud or whether their declared profits are much higher and they're taking more money out of the taxpayer base than they've declared in the procurement. And they said, look, can you look into whether we can use Bitcoin as a mechanism to do that? And I think what they wanted to do was trace every transaction, act as the central custodian of record, exchange of record at the end, and then basically make sure that the cost of public goods and services was driven down across major capital infrastructure projects. So, it was a really interesting project. We did it, pitched it. The answer was sort of, sorry lads, up for a knighthood next year. Don't want to rattle rock the boat too much. So, maybe talk to my successor. Really innovative, but it was just too much to go for at that time. And I think what they wanted really was a CBDC. But that was 2014. I was obsessed from that point. I was like,
Really?
how does it
Wow.
work?
It catches you, doesn't it? Oh
Yeah,
my
I
God.
think that it was the technological side that gripped me first, and I then spent a couple of years just thinking about it, reading about it alongside my career, and just went fully down the Austrian economics rabbit hole. Completely changed most, if not all, of my worldviews, and I just had all this information in my head. And it was the days before podcasts. It was before Pomp launched his podcast, which was really popular. It was before Peter McCormack's podcast. It was sort of, it was really early days. There was very little information. It was mainly Andreas that I was sort of learning from. So myself and one of my eventual co-founders, we just talked about it quite a lot, and we set up this training course. So this was sort of early 2017 maybe. We set up a training course. We'd hire a room in London, just off Trafalgar Square at the IOD. And we'd bring 20 or 30 finance professionals, so lawyers, accountants, VCs, anyone who wanted to know about Bitcoin, money, and how the rest of the digital asset ecosystem fitted in. We wanted to give them a framework on how to think about it. And it was effectively a light touch version of the Bitcoin standard in a day. And the reason I give you this backstory is because
that's great.
The last, we did it every 6 weeks for about 2 or 3 years before COVID hit. And every session, there was one question that would undermine the whole day. And that was, look, David, you've just spent 6 or 7 hours telling me why you think Bitcoin is money and how it meets store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. First of all, are you okay? That's a lot of time to talk. Second of all, I can't buy a sandwich with it. I can't buy coffee with it. Nowhere in the UK accepts it. I don't believe you. It's not money. It fails on the most basic of tests that I can't spend it. And I just didn't have an answer. There's nothing that I could say, well, look, just wait, just wait. It will come. It will come. And, there was a few people that I knew at the time, and we sort of said, look, is it possible that it isn't going to happen, that maybe actually we need to take action and build this ourselves. So the proposition, the idea, the motivation came. We saw that Bitcoin was going to be adopted as a store of value by bigger funds, institutions. That was obvious. But there was a job to be done. And we thought, actually, I think the world is missing a trick here. Everyone is seeing and thinking of Bitcoin as an alternative payment method. And whilst that's not necessarily untrue, introducing it into a merchant payment stack adds so much more friction to them as a merchant and a human being. So the question was actually, okay, let's first of all build an incredible payment experience, but then let's embed it and nest it inside a traditional experience. Let's meet merchants where they are today. Let's not try and, tell them that their existing infrastructure and payment services are rubbish, because let's be honest, Apple Pay DoubleClick is incredible. It's just, and merchants don't care what happens in the background as long as they do get paid, and there isn't too high of a transaction cost. So we needed to make sure that we had a proposition that, first of all, was very, very good from a Bitcoin payments experience. Then also that we addressed all of the merchant challenges, because introducing another degree of friction didn't wash. It was too much. So that's what we did. We set out on the journey to build everything. Had to find the right team, bring the right mix of Bitcoiners versus traditional payments experience into the team, and go from there. And that's the journey we find ourselves on now, accelerating Bitcoiners' money in the merchant payment stack, because people didn't believe me when I told them that Bitcoin was money a few years ago. Let's not pretend that this isn't ego driven. They damaged my ego so badly in that session, and they didn't believe me, that I was like, right, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. I took that seriously, and let's build an entire business around this one question that's undermined my day.
It's so interesting. What I love is the genesis of all ideas. Like, they come from different places at different times, and it depends where you are in your life.
Yeah.
It depends, like, is this an opportunity you can take right now? What of all of the like 80 ideas you've had in the last 2 days are actually the one that you want to pursue? It can be very difficult to actually figure out, well, this is what I'm going to focus on. But once you made that call, I'd love to learn about the traction of the business, because and I'll give, these are admittedly completely anecdotal, but I think interesting examples. Big news in the Bitcoin space last year was the rollout of the Bitcoin option for merchants currently using the Square terminals. And the Bitcoin news was going crazy, but no one else was really talking about it. And I found this out in two very clear ways. One, a local cafe that I love in the town I was living in at the time didn't have a fucking clue that he could accept Bitcoin using his Square terminal that he was already using. One. Two, there was a butcher that I like to use that's really into the idea of sovereignty and takes a very holistic approach to how they rear their cattle, and they're already conscious of being audited in a way they don't want to be. And so you can absolutely go into their butcher's shop and you can pay for stuff using a wallet of Satoshi transaction, and they'll take your Bitcoin and they'll sponsor the local meetup and this kind of thing. But their question about the Square stuff was like, if I switch this on, am I going to somehow get someone who's gone, oh, look, all these different people across the country are now using this thing, and am I going to get unnecessary attention? So how have you found it building a payments service and incorporating it into merchants? Like, what do they constantly say, oh, I can't do it for this reason? Or I'd love to understand how that's been for you guys.
Look, that what you're sort of touching on here is the exact reason we're doing this the way that we are. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I guess the sad realization that I came to, and that I still harbor, is that people just, as much as we love Bitcoin, the mass majority of people just don't care. And, they just see Bitcoin as something interesting, and if I can pay with it, great. Most people just want to pay for stuff. Most merchants just want to get paid. It's going to take a lot longer than I'd anticipated for the world to move towards Bitcoin. Now, External factors may accelerate that if we see this continuing rise towards totalitarianism, having all of a sudden having a bearer asset that you can hold and that someone can transfer to you, all of a sudden becomes incredibly valuable. So, that will accelerate, as we're seeing that right now. The rollout of social credit systems and central bank currencies, I think, will help Bitcoin adoption, not through the way that we like, but as a defensive technology for people. But that's exactly the conclusion I came to, is that, okay, we can build a world-class payment solution, a Bitcoin payment solution. I'm not worried about that. The problem is scale and adoption. And you're absolutely right. It was just incredible that Square have done what they've done. For me, that just validates our entire strategy and approach. But it also shows and reiterates exactly what you said from those anecdotes. It just shows how early we are and how much work there is to do on the education front. And people don't go on holiday and get on a plane and knowing how physics and aerodynamics work. They just don't question it. I just want to get to my hotel in a nice hot country and have a nice relax. They don't really care about everything
on
else.
time, preferably.
Right. And I think as Bitcoiners, maybe we underestimate that fact. It's our job to make sure the thermodynamics and the airplane works. Don't push it down the merchant's throat if they don't want to know about it. Just tell them how great an experience it's going to be. So that's what we do. We've designed the whole business as a Trojan horse. We want to lay the infrastructure, and you talked about Amboss earlier and others. Anyone doing anything in the Lightning space, I'm just in awe of and a massive fan. I see our job and our role as Musket as the people who build the destinations. We aren't going to build the roads. We aren't going to build the rails. We're building out all of those destinations for people to spend their Bitcoin. Other people can tackle other parts of the problem, right? That's not where we're focusing our effort. But if we build out all those destinations, then the likelihood is we're going to see more and more transaction throughput. And there's a counter side to that as well, which we can come on to another product that we're building, which gets Bitcoin and Lightning specifically into people's pockets through our payroll solution. But I think it's a really interesting space, and we've designed it this way because when we go and talk to merchants, they get hit so many times every week with new payment providers. It could be Elevon one week, WorldPay another week, Square another week. The sales machine and the incentive based approach for commission-based sales in every country is really aggressive. So you end up with aggressive sales approaches. Expletive warning coming up, but I've done it myself. I've been in the stores and gone and talked to business owners. And you go in and tell them who you are and why you're here. If you lead with payments. My name's David. I work for a business called Musket. We're here we deliver payments for your business. They literally tell you to fuck off. And they put the phone down. Or physically to your face. One of my team literally told in no uncertain terms to leave the premises and never ever come back.
Wow.
But if you lead with Bitcoin, it's a nice way in. So right now it's serving us quite nicely as a sales strategy. We go in, whether it's a cold call, an email, or a physical session, we say, look, what do you think about Bitcoin? Did you know it's a new payment method? Everyone's using it, or growth is accelerating, whatever the narrative is. And typically, very quickly, merchants have got questions. They've got questions that they've never had anyone to ask. They don't know where to research it. So they'll just engage you in a nice conversation. So as a minimum, you can build a little bit of trust. You can not come across as threatening, and then before you know it, you know exactly how much money that is going through their books, who their current provider is, why they don't like them, what their rates are, and maybe there's an angle that we can win, whether it's through payments, introducing Bitcoin, or our EPOS hospitality stack, which covers all their inventory, stock management, staff control, shift patterns and rotas, etc. We can typically deliver value in some way, whether that's lower cost for processing or through improved outcomes and business services. And for us, Bitcoin, it helps lead with that conversation. Sometimes it quite often helps to build that trust, which gets us over the line. 80% of the conversation, though, is on rates and outcomes and service performance, about the basics, about car payments typically. So, for us, we had to become world class at Bitcoin first, then world class at payments, and then world class at telling a story that stitches all of that together. And we're on the journey to do that right now. We've got about 50 million live processing on the platform right now. We should end January over 100 million. This year, our target is to grow to about 1 billion volume processing. With a bit of luck, there's 2 deals that we're closing, hopefully. So there's one, if we can get it over the line this half of the year, that will be over 2,000 venues in the UK that we can onboard with. And that will be a similar approach to Square. So we'll be onboarding them onto us, but then it will be up to them whether they want to accept the Bitcoin component or not. Again, we won't push it down their throat too much. So we'll just be a critical or friendly agent to support them and help them along that journey with education and toolkits and other things. But again, I think as a final point there, our journey is such that I want to do this the right way. If you turn Bitcoin on and then no one uses it, it can have a negative effect. If a merchant puts their hand up and says, I now accept Bitcoin, and then it's tumbleweed, no one goes and no one uses it, it doesn't look good to the merchant because they've just been told by a bunch of Bitcoiners that everyone's going to flock to their store or volume and trade will increase by 2 to 3%. So I think what we try and do is make sure when we onboard someone, we then make sure we link them into others in the Bitcoin space of interest or other potential business partners. So we try and do the best we absolutely can to help them along that journey. And then talking to them about what to do with their Bitcoin. Once they've accepted it, they then theoretically have their own micro treasury. And, small businesses that hold their Bitcoin, ideally, we haven't arrived at the maturity of the market yet, but ideally I'd love to be extending into the financial services sector so that we can offer Bitcoin collateralized loans. So, more aggressive rates in terms of fiat that you can structure tied and collateralized with Bitcoin, so that over time, as the Bitcoin price goes up, actually paying that loan off doesn't become burdensome. And ideally, they never have to liquidate their Bitcoin at all. But they can use that as collateral to expand their business, bring new people in, whatever they need to. So I think we see it as Bitcoin as a Trojan horse within our broader ecosystem, but it's the beginning of an ecosystem that they can then use to pay their supply base. They can use it as incentives to pay their staff, either bonuses or salaries in, and they can then use it as a reward currency for cashback for people shopping at their store. So that's sort of how I think we're going to continue to roll out. For now, it's just a hardcore sales mission, just knocking on doors, picking up the phone, chasing those leads. We've got quite a lot of subscriptions to various lead gen engines online. My commercial team are fantastic. So it's growing, but that's what 2026 looks like for us. We've done a lot of the building. Most of the infrastructure is in place. It's time to sell and scale now.
Awesome, David. Well, I wish you the very, very best of luck doing that, because in some ways, it's just brute force. You just got to get out there and go and tell everyone about it. But that's not possible without the hustle to have got to this point. Like identifying the problem. Okay, how can we solve it in some way? Okay, we haven't solved it well enough. Now we've got to add this, this, and this. Okay, now we have actually something quite useful. Is anyone using it? Shit, no one's using it. Okay, now someone's using it. How do we do more of the stuff that they want to actually use it for? What's really cool, though, is to hear that it's something that's been created with Bitcoin at its core. And in the not too distant future, I hope that will be the norm, but it's not yet the case. Yeah. And so I wonder, the timeline, it is probably longer than what I expect to. So I'm with you on that in terms of like the wider adoption pattern. But as a business founder and building out this product, do you think the fact that do you have Bitcoin on the balance sheet of the business, for example, and does it put you in a better position? I'm with you totally on the Austrian economics stuff, like sitting down and thinking about time preference and going, oh my God, this stuff makes sense. Like I went through a business management degree and the maths and stats I did is just completely irrelevant in hindsight. Microeconomics stuff I did, it's all Keynesian driven and didn't actually make any sense. You just had to regurgitate an exam and move on. With the Bitcoin at the core of the kind of intellectual capital of your business, you're in such a strong position. It just might take a bit longer to get bigger. Do you agree with that? And I hope that more Bitcoiners start businesses. They see an opportunity, actually go out there and try and create something. It might not work, but it also might. So yeah, and I mean, a caveat to that as well being, not a caveat, but an add-on to that being, did you raise money for the business and take investment? And what was that process like as well?
Yeah. Raising investment's awful. Worst experience I've ever had in my entire life. I'm still in the middle of
Wow,
it. So,
interesting.
but I also, we also launched at a time when the conditions were awful. So, it's as a first-time founder, rather than not coming with a book of investors that will just open a check because you've got a track record.
Mm.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, we started July 2023. We raised 750K. I started about 9 months before that, trying to raise it. It took a while. We got about 300K off the bat, and then it took another, I'd say, another 6 to 9 months to close the remainder. So we had enough to start and break ground and start building and paying the engineers. And then it was a process of continuing to build everything out, bring the right people in the team, build out our commercial contracts with our supply chain, and go from there. So that took us through to sort of January, February 2024. And then we opened up our seed round, which we're in the final phase now. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's taken us over a year January 2025. So the first set of 750K lasted us best part of 18 months, I'd say. We could go much faster and harder if we had more funding. My team is incredible. Ben DeWall, who's our CTO, used to be at Lightning Labs and Swan Bitcoin. He's just got an incredible pool of specifically Lightning engineers that we've got on our books, which is great. So then it was, okay, raise another round. So we're raising 5 million at the moment. We're in the final phase of raising that 5 million, but we are going to move straight into our Series A. And what that looks like, I think, is market dependent. We could, 10 million actually gets us to a lot of within 2 to 3 years, gets us a lot of the product roadmap and engineering outcomes. 20 allows us to do a bit more M&A. There's a few smaller businesses that I'd quite like to acquire that have got technology and customer bases that I think would be incredibly valuable to us. 100 million means that we can start to go after Visa and MasterCard. We can, so it depends. I've got a plan of how much can we raise based on the different objectives and outcomes. Ultimately, the path and the outcomes don't change. It may just take longer. So if we had, a bottomless pit of cash, we can just accelerate everything and go after everything now. But yeah, that's a very, very horrible phase and difficult journey. Liquidity is tough. The hurdle rates, you've got to demonstrate that your product works, that your team is good, that you've got some traction, that the revenues markers are met. So, I think the hurdle rate now is a lot harder than perhaps it was pre-COVID for funding. So, yeah, anyone that's doing this, I salute them. Yeah. In terms of, I forgot the rest of your question, Jake. I do apologize.
Well, it was a long question, which was a bit unfair. I try not to do that too much, but sometimes I'm also thinking about them. It was more just like the mindset that you can have when you approach business, when you have Bitcoin behind you and the understanding for what sound money is.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can make plans.
So on that, I mean, I guess, do we hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we're a very lean startup. We have to. I hold it as long as I can before I have to pay salaries. And the bigger we've gone from a team of 6 to a team of 22 in a year. So we're in real scale mode. And again, as I say, we've gone from 0 processing volume to the best part of 50, and a pipeline of over 800, and a revenue forecast with a pretty high degree of confidence of delivering it that sees us process about 1 billion by this time next year. And that generates about 3 million ARR.
Cool.
for us. It's the numbers are very big because we're processing everything, but we make about 35 basis points per transaction on the fiat side. So, and again, the reason I give you this is because approaching it as a Bitcoiner is quite a narrow focus. And the way that we started out, we would just have been perennially dependent upon handouts, or not handouts, investment from VCs and constant dilution, raise. I don't like the idea of raising and diluting. I like traditional, certain, give me some investment, I will turn that into a profitable business, and we don't need to continually dilute. I don't necessarily like the Silicon Valley completely dilute until you're worth 10 billion sort of model. But I'm learning on that side. I'm sort of learning to soften my approach a bit, but because there is a balance, I think, in between of actually raising the right amount of capital at the right time to fuel your growth. But I think so yes, we hold Bitcoin as long as we can on the balance sheets. I would love to hold it longer. We pay a lot of the staff in Bitcoin. We just deal with the accounting on the other side of that. But I think the two things, Bitcoin's inevitable, right? And I, as a deep believer in Bitcoin,
Yeah, I'm completely with you.
Bitcoin wins. It outlives humanity. It's, if this is a simulation, I think I tweeted this morning, then Bitcoin is simulation money.
Yeah.
It's so hard coded into the laws of mathematics, physics, thermodynamics, just the universal laws that govern our world and our universe, that it wins at the end of the day. You just cannot. I spent so long in those early years trying to think of, well, how can Bitcoin be broken? How can it not work? And I think Saifedean outlines the only way that Bitcoin could not succeed is likely by total global cooperation from all governments and all institutions, and a return to a gold standard type of environment. That's never happened, and it never will. There's too much risk and too much geopolitical division. So if that's the only risk, really, we can address the quantum computing risks. We can address any other risks that Bitcoin that are thrown at Bitcoin. So if it therefore becomes inevitable, building products and services around it that help it and accelerate the adoption becomes inevitably successful. The only problem you've got to solve for is survival and cash flow, which we've solved through alignment with payment card schemes, because actually you can make a small clip on every transaction, and by providing value-added services. So we do have a next generation hospitality and management system that can completely transform a restaurant or a pub or a bar's front of house and back office. So by providing the good, bolting all those amazing merchant outcomes together with a Bitcoin outcome, you've got a really powerful product. So I think that's given me the belief in the business. And I did have to think about this a lot before we launched. We're just in that phase where now it's just making sure we've got enough funding to grow, and that we are growing and we're making the right partnerships. And, I'd be worried if I was sat here and we were spending money and we weren't seeing the traction or the interest. But the people that we're speaking to, the businesses, these are enormous businesses. We're not going to win the card processing volume for all of them, but we might start with Bitcoin, and then we can work on the card processing volume over time, and move that over to us again as we mature and grow. But as I said, we've got an 850 million sales pipeline right now that's split across e-commerce for our online gateway with our WooCommerce plugin, and across food and beverage hospitality merchants. UK, European footprint. So we launched our first merchant in Spain a couple of weeks ago. We've got a really great, the three partnerships that I'll just finish this section on, that we've got. One, Gibraltar International Bank. So a small bank in the grand scheme of banks, but we are their in-house payments company. So they don't have a payments division. They've signed an agreement with us that we are their exclusive payments provider. Now we have a revenue share with them, but effectively they've got a wonderful customer base in Gibraltar, and we are in the middle of rolling out there. We think there's at least a 500 million volume opportunity there that we're rolling out across. And in the gaming and gambling space, Gibraltar processes 40 to 50% of the UK gaming and gambling volume because of its unique jurisdiction and tax relationship. So that's slightly changed recently, but it's still enormously advantageous. So our links into there through that partnership are incredibly valuable. Verifone, as I mentioned, is our hardware provider. So we'll be using their next generation hardware, both for the EPOS and for the card payment terminal. Inside the Verifone device is a Vodafone SIM and eSIM. So our merchants then can make sure that they can process transactions wherever they are. If they're at a festival, if they're in the middle of a dead zone of no signal, well, it will swap from the Vodafone network onto whatever network is available. So again, you can always process the Bitcoin transactions alongside card transactions. And then Google as well. We've partnered with Google Chrome OS team because our EPOS, they want use cases to demonstrate how stable the Chrome OS browser is. They use us and take us along to their demos across Europe. We went to Barcelona, Paris, London with them last year to demonstrate our EPOS solution. So, they've got they build a checkout environment, and you go and have an awful experience on one checkout, and then they say, well, go next door and use the Musket checkout, which is running Chrome OS. That was another provider with the.
Please come this way.
Here's the Musket one. So that's nice. So we struck a few big partnerships. So I think we're doing both. We're getting the ones and twos on the board from smaller merchants, as well as going after much bigger retailers and scale partnerships. And Bitcoin's a difference maker. Everyone from board level to CEO, we don't bother really going in and building our relationships in a business. We go straight in at the top to talk to the leadership about how Bitcoin can transform their business. We can help them with payments. Their CFO can benefit from a treasury strategy, and we can give them all of the infrastructure they need to do one or all of those. So it's a really powerful thing. And as you say, as a final point, anyone that is thinking about starting a Bitcoin business, just make sure you've got a route to revenue, but attaching Bitcoin and a Bitcoin strategy onto existing business processes or a business proposition, it's incredibly powerful. It doesn't really matter what it is. I just think Bitcoin wins regardless.
Gosh, very cool, David. Well done with all the progress. We're shunting up on the hour, so I'm going to keep this as just one final question. It's a difficult journey, entrepreneurship. So if you could share, and if anyone's out there thinking about it, or maybe just at the very early stages, what was just the one thing, if you could remember so far, that you wish you'd known?
I wish I'd known how hard funding was going to be. The trouble is, if I'd have known how hard it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because there have been days when I've...
Wow.
There have been times when it's been so close, I don't take... we bring the team. I brought the team in at the right stages and the right growth, but there's been times when you're staring down. You've got 24 hours to find 50K, and it's not as drastic as that, because at any one time, you've got typically millions of pounds worth of conversations live, about investment, but. Talking to getting that investment from a discussion through to signed paperwork through to funds in account takes time, and if it's just you doing it and there's a handful of others building the product, it takes time, but it also takes quite a big toll. Certainly has on me. Right now my sort of role is very much guidance and direction, but focusing, I'd say 80+% of my time on closing the next funding round. We've spent a lot of time in the last quarter defining our vision, our product roadmap, what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it. And the team are now able just to go off and execute that whilst I focus on bringing the investment in. Because for us, we've got another year before we're truly EBIT and cash flow positive. From that point, we're fine, but you've got to survive. And if you don't survive, then it doesn't matter how good the idea is. You need that oxygen. So I think funding is the hardest bit. So, plan that out, figure out where you're going to get it from, make sure you're ready for funding as well. Again, I probably watched too many startup films and assumed that a good deck and a great story and a nice
It
suit
was
would be enough
enough.
to get you investment. But the hurdle rate's just so high. And I think, reflecting on that, what does that all boil down to? If you're not willing to give everything, and I'd hesitate, stop short of saying if you're not willing to die for it. I don't think anything's necessarily worth dying for, but you
Mm,
have to be willing, in my experience, to sacrifice
mm,
everything to make it
mm,
work, because it takes such a strong mental toll. So if you've got a great, stable setup where you've got supportive family, partner, maybe your kids that you either don't have kids or they're a little bit older,
mm,
you need a buffer. You need to know it's going to be okay if everything went wrong.
mm,
Not too much so that you're comfortable and you don't push hard. But those days when I was sort of a couple of years ago waking up thinking, I've got to find 50K by Friday. How? It's Tuesday.
mm.
I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Wow.
But I did, only because, I think the mission was so clear, the drive was so strong, and I just didn't see any other option. You have to
Mm,
just do whatever it takes to make sure that each step is made. And then you look back, and all of a sudden, we've made an absolute shit ton of amazing steps. Whether that's funding, a product build, a new launch, signed a client,
mm.
found a couple of team members, and all of a sudden there's a sort of trail of success, in inverted commas, behind you, and you're just staring down, a wall of fear again. It's like, well, how the hell are we going to hit a
Next bit.
billion?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, how are we going to go from there to a billion sales and profitability and raise 10 times the amount? And it's just doing just the same ethos. Just get up, work hard, and
Do it.
network, and live and breathe the mission. And it, theoretically, I think, what's the phrase? I don't know who it came from. Maybe it's some sort of cheesy Chinese proverb, but set off on the path, and then along the journey, the way will appear,
Mm.
something like that. But if you know where you're going and you do that and you commit to it, then I think quite often events and circumstances can serendipitously go in your favor.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I really like
yeah,
the phrase, David, that's action leads to clarity.
right, yeah,
It's kind of
that's a
similar,
good
right?
way
Just
of putting it. Well done.
yeah. Well, David, that's all we have time for in the call today. I like to keep it to about an hour. Thank you
Cool.
so much for joining me and taking me through all that. If I could share one last thing, just listening to you, the the ability to be sensitive to your own frustration and difficulties is an incredible thing to witness. And I'm sure it has been very hard, what you just explained. But fronting up and actually saying that was really fucking hard
Hmm.
is crucial, I'm sure, to like working through it. Because a lot of people would just take on the stress and ignore it and be fine. Do you know what I mean? And just being like, I don't know what the right phrase is, being sensitive or being willing to be vulnerable and publicly with a conversation like this, absolutely awesome. And it's why people like podcasts, because they listen to that and they go, oh, they're real. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to check that Musket thing out. Oh, I'm going to tell my mate about it. And it's suddenly like you'll get a phone call from someone who's listened to this podcast who's like, I know a crew of pubs, or I know, do you know what I mean? And that's how the snowball continues.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's authenticity, if I could summarize it as one word.
Yeah.
So, yeah, David, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. I wish you the very best of luck building Musket over the years to come. Anywhere or any final send off that you want to share that we might not have covered, or how can people reach out?
Look, thanks for having me. It's been great to be on, and it's a really interesting point. I didn't mean to turn this into a therapy session.
No, no, no. I love it. That's what long form
But
podcast all about, mate.
but you raise a really good point. It has been a very tough journey, both personally, professionally, and it's been incredibly hard. If there's anyone out there who's, whether you're building a Bitcoin business or not, just I didn't have really anyone to chat to about it. Just rattled around in my own head and trying to solve problems. So if anyone does want a therapy session and just to shoot the breeze, drop me a note. I'm on X, Musket, MUSQET_David. On X, drop me an email, david@musket.tech. But yeah, reach out. I'm pretty easy. If you're in the UK, always happy to meet, typically in London. And I tend to be at Bitcoin events and conferences a few times a year. So always reach out, and yeah, happy to help anyone, especially anyone working in Bitcoin or generally just going through a similar journey. Always happy to share and help.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, David.
Awesome. Take care.